A big welcome to all the viewers watching Soul to Soul talk show. On this episode, we have an eminent personality from Australia, Brother Charlie Hogg, who has had a formal education in architecture and has been a member of the Brahmakumaris since the past 37 years. He is presently the coordinator of the centers in Australia. Brother, a pleasure to have you with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Saranya. Thank you.
In this episode, we will be covering on all the spiritual experiences that he has had before and maybe after coming in contact with the Brahmakumaris. And so let's, before that, we will start with your, say, the formal education that you've had. Brother, you have studied architecture, and have you worked in that field?
No, actually, Saranya, I grew up in Melbourne, and I went to Melbourne University, and I did architecture, but I think even as a young person I was very interested in philosophy and spirituality, and so I took time out and I actually travelled all over the world for 3 years. And
At what age?
I was 20 years old.
20 years old?
Yeah.
Wow, that's very young to to go on such a quest.
Yeah, it was, to me, in a way, I see it as my education, because I spent time in Southeast Asia, in India, the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and everywhere I lived in religious communities, and it wasn't even a conscious thing. But I lived with Hindus and Buddhists and Muslims and Christians and Taoists and many more, and it was a wonderful insight into religious life in a way, and spiritual life.
So did this interest or inclination towards religion and spirituality, was it like an inborn feeling, or was it because of someone who inspired you?
To be very honest with you, when I grew up, fundamentally all religions are in Australia, but the main one is a Christian religion. I went to a Christian school, and when I was 13, the tradition is that you are confirmed in the church. That's the language they use. So it's like a formal entry. Actually, my family weren't particularly religious, but I went along, and I did it. I went along for maybe 3 months or so, but when my family asked me, what have you learnt? To be honest, I said, I think I'm an atheist, because I found it very hard. Very hard actually to understand the concept of God. The concept of God was very much that God is a very authoritarian, punishing, judgmental personality. And but still I was very interested in learning about myself and my inner world, and so I began to travel. And I think when I was traveling, I would say I was an agnostic, meaning I don't know really who God is, but I was fascinated in the ideas. But
did you fear God?
No, not really. But I settled in London, and I was working in London. Actually, I was working in the theatre at that time, in the Royal Shakespeare Theatre Company. And that was a really interesting job, and many of them were also interested in spiritual things. And it was there that in London I went around to so many, not only spiritual organizations, but philosophical organizations. And
like? Like?
Well, there was a group there called the Philadelphia Association, and the Philadelphia Association was the latest thinking in psychology and psychiatry at that time. People like Aldous Huxley and really the great sort of psychiatrists who were trying to understand the human psyche from a scientific perspective. So I was sort of coming from the scientific side and the spiritual side. But and it's actually then that as I was moving around, I came across the Brahmakumaris. Yeah.
So when did you meet them? Where did you meet them?
I went to a place in Hyde Park, which was known as the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain, and I met Daddy Genki and Sister Genti. And it was interesting, because I often feel it was not so much what they said, it was the feelings I got. And I think often, you know, when you meet people, it's often the feelings you get from them. And there was something I could tell, because in my journey I was really wanting to know how to experience something spiritual. Everywhere you go, people talk philosophical ideas that appeal to an intellect, but I wanted to know, how do you really taste and feel peace? And actually it was it was really when I saw them, I could see the way they were behaving, and in their face, I could feel that they had something. So that's why I went along and practiced or learned meditation from them. I had been practicing meditation, but I learned the Brahmakumaris style. I think that's today people want to see. There's so many clever people with clever ideas that are very articulate. But I think I noticed where I mean, I'm based in Australia, but I've travelled everywhere in the world. People want to experience. They want a different feeling in their mind and their heart. They want to taste something. They just don't want to believe in a philosophy. And I actually feel, what I notice in the Western world, most people grew up with a religious background. Really, most did. But they've gone away from it in their professional lives. And they want to return with a spiritual outlook, not just a set of beliefs, rigid beliefs, but they want to have a practical way of experiencing a higher state of consciousness, experiencing God. And I think we have in Australia, the Brahmakumaris have 3 retreat centres. Every weekend they're full, completely full. And we have people from every corner of the world and every religion coming every weekend, and they love it because we make it a very experiential program. You know, so they feel different inside.
So is this knowledge that is given by the Brahmakumaris, is it very easily acceptable? Definitely
some. I mean, I started in London, but after 18 months I went back to Australia. And so while I was there, since I've been there, I think I've taught meditation in organizations, in companies, in schools, in hospitals, in universities, in Parliament House to politicians. And these are Australians. Meditation has an extremely good reputation. It has a good reputation because people know that they've lost control of their mind. No matter how educated they are. You know, I met one man in Australia recently. He's a billionaire. And you know what he said? He said, I've been totally successful out there and a complete failure in here, in his own words. Never he said, I'm not happy. I'm not a happy person.
So it can answer, you know, the need for any person.
It can, but as you know, everyone is different. Everyone is different. It's not what everyone is looking for. But I think, generally speaking, people want to develop more understanding of their mind, their feelings, and more control of their inner world. Because I think I did a speaking tour in Australia maybe a year ago with a man who was a very successful businessman but became very depressed, completely depressed. And when he came out of his depression, he wrote a book. And he got many famous Australians, that's sporting people, politicians, business leaders, to write about depression, because in his talk he says 1 in 4 people is suffering from depression in our world, whether it's India or outside, same everywhere. 1 in 4, it's like an epidemic.
Right.
And in psychology, depression is like a sadness that my dream in life hasn't been met, to be loved, to be valued, to be accepted. But spiritually, depression is like a mourning for the loss of my true identity. You know, I live my life, but who am I? You know, and even the Christians, they know they're a spirit or a soul, just like people from a Hindu background, but they don't experience it. Same thing, you know, it's just a belief.
Yes, there's a mention of the concept in these scriptures.
That's right, yeah.
But they don't experience.
Don't experience, yeah.
So as a teacher of this art of Raj Yoga and the spiritual knowledge, when you're teaching this to others, are there any concepts in this that people find it hard to believe or accept?
And once again, because the society in Australia and is a very, very multicultural society. So you get every type of view. Like 32% were born outside the country, and then another huge percentage, their parents were. So you get such a variety of people. So it's a variety response. The idea in the Brahmakumaris view, we teach about the self, the idea of the soul, virtually everyone accepts, and even the supreme soul. The philosophy of karma, people like. But when it comes to the journey of the soul, reincarnation, it's different. You know, once I was in Chicago, and I was actually in the audience of the Oprah Winfrey show. I was there,
okay.
and it was the 31st of October, Halloween, and she did a show on reincarnation. And so she asked the audience, it was maybe 100 people, who believes in reincarnation? And you know, it was exactly 50% did
And
to the person, and 50% didn't. You know. But actually, 30 to 40% of Christians believe in reincarnation too, even though it's not really a part of the Christian philosophy. So, but some do struggle with that, and some of the ideas of time that the Brahmakumaris offer. But we teach everything. Many people are vegetarian, especially young people. Many people. It's very common. Very common.
Were there any ideas that you had to experiment with, some concept that you had to experiment with before believing it, or did you naturally believe, instantly believe everything?
I think it made a lot of sense to me.
All the concepts? Virtually
everything, yeah. Because one of the reasons I didn't go straight into the practice of my architecture, and my family has quite a, had quite a large company. They owned a company, and family members went there, and I didn't do it because I felt there was a big change happening in the world. I could intuitively feel that you spend all your life investing in a sort of a certain career, but it felt like the world was changing so fast. Something, there was one British historian who said that there's been more change in the last 50 years than the whole of the rest of history put together. Now, that may be an exaggeration, but I think it's such a changing world, so I felt I wanted to know what was happening. It just felt, on the one hand, if you go to almost any country in the world, in my experience, they say things are getting worse everywhere. The values in people, the behavior in people, the leaders, people complain. But on the other hand, there's this spiritual sort of silent revolution happening where people, I think if they can have a new experience in their life, will completely change their life. And this is what we find in the Western world often. People have a new experience, they'll change their diet, change their lives, they'll change everything quite happily.
So can we say it's like a call of time to change our outlook, our views on spirituality?
I would say that's exactly the right way of saying it, and that's what I mean. I think people are very educated. They've moved away from traditional religion, but they are now much more interested in spirituality. And I've seen the statistics in Australia, which is like the UK and America. It's less and less people go to church, and yet the statistics show more and more interest in spirituality. So it's like people aren't going to the traditional places to seek, answers.
They want to experience it.
Yeah, and they want experience. Meditation is a very, very common thing. People like to meditate.
So how long did you take to experience whatever you wanted to experience on this spiritual journey? And what did you want to experience?
Well, I think I was interested in, trying to experience, of course, really who I was and the feelings of peace, internal peace and well-being. But I suppose, my own truth, finding my own truth. And I had some initial experiences, and I think the great art of meditation is to create newness, because I meditate, I wake up early every day, but it's like anything in life, you can become a habitual pattern, so it becomes a little bit ordinary. And what I've really learned from the Brahmakumaris is that to always engage with new ideas, because the seeds of ideas take you into experience, You think about ideas, and as you realize them, it takes you into a new feeling or experience. So I really try to create new experiences. But early on, to be honest, because I had been an atheist, not a strong one, but I just found the concepts of God I was offered not so attractive. And then I became an agnostic, I don't know. That early on I really had amazing experiences of relationship with God, which is as
earlier in the sense? Before?
Early in my practice as
Okay.
with the Brahmakumaris. It was quite amazing. Very, very powerful experiences, and they were so wonderful. And I think, I had a lovely family, and I was, I think quite a happy person, but it was an experience of love that I don't think I had tasted before, the purity, the depth of love on a completely different level. It's different from human love in a way, and that was so strong. I think that's been the motivation for me to continue.
Can you share one of these experiences with us?
Well, actually, even within weeks of my sort of beginning to go along to the Brahmakumaris Centre in London, it was a little place in those days, I was thinking about all these ideas, and I think it was an interesting experience where, how sometimes time stops, and it was almost like this eternal realization that what I'd really looked for, I had so much experience of love, almost like drenched in pure love, and I had such a realization, actually that's what I'd been searching for. Because by the time I was 22, I'd covered most of the world. And my external journey was really an internal journey, to really, and when I had that experience of love, I just knew this is where I belong, this is who I am. I know it's not for everybody by any means, but I felt extremely comfortable, and I've never had another thought since. It was interesting, even as a young person, I've always believed in reincarnation, but I felt I'd experienced a lot of things in the past. I wasn't wanting to really get out and make millions of dollars and do that sort of thing. I was more interested in finding my truth.
So, brother, these beautiful experiences that you had, as you shared in the beginning of this journey, how did it affect the relations that you shared with your family? Did it strengthen, or did it create a gap, or?
Well, as I said, I was living in London. My family's in Melbourne, so I was on one side of the world and they were on the other side of the world. But they're very open-minded people. I mean, since I was young, my grandfather had a textile company, and they used to buy all the raw materials from India, Pakistan, Africa. So each year my father and uncles would spend a month or 6 weeks all over India buying up materials and things. So, family had quite a connection with
India.
With India, quite a strong connection with India. I had been, even when I was younger, much younger, I always preferred vegetarian food, and so as soon as I actually started traveling, I became a vegetarian. So, and they're very open, they weren't really difficult at all, in fact quite supportive, I would say. I've got a big family, and I'd say most of them have done meditation courses and things like that. They're not against it, put it that way, but they don't follow it also. My father has visited Mount Abu, and my sister, and some aunts and cousins and things like that.
So what are the physical, say, things that you had to abstain yourself from? Did you have to change your lifestyle completely when you started this journey?
When I was a teenager, a bit older, yeah, sure, I used to drink and smoke a bit and do all that sort of stuff, parties. But I think, and like a lot, that's often a thing you do at that age. But I'd already sort of lost a bit of interest in all that, because it was a bit superficial. But as a young person, you sometimes just, so yeah, for some years I was, really into all that sort of stuff, partying and all that. But I think after, even when I was about 19, 20, I decided that I was much more attracted to these things. So slowly, my diet changed and all that sort of stuff. It was never that important for me, but yeah.
And did your friends accept this change in you? Did they, or what about the friendship? Did it affect the friendship that you shared with everyone?
Once again, I think a lot of my friends were interested in these sorts of things, but some of them, definitely when you have different interests, your friendships do change. And so, yes, I mean, I still am friendly with some of them, but and I definitely have a different group of friends perhaps now. But I'd say, I think people, one thing I think people try to accept difference, you know. I feel anyway that most of them have been okay with me doing what I am. Maybe they think I'm a little bit different.
And do you find this lifestyle more enriching and more purposeful than your previous?
Yeah, I mean, it feels very natural for me. I love it, you know, that's why I do it. If I wasn't liking it, I don't think I'd do it. And I think that, you see, when I studied architecture, as I travelled, my thinking was that I would go back to university and study something and join a United Nations organization somewhere in the world, in a third world country or something like that, and try to help. So, you know, that was really my thinking. And but when I began to meditate, and it changed my mind so much, my mind felt so different. I really thought, well, this is what a lot of people need. So, I suppose I've put a lot of energy into not only practicing myself, but also teaching people in a language they can understand, you know, in Western countries, about what meditation is and why it's beneficial. But you don't have to convince them much. People are interested, very interested. In a lot of the big corporates in Australia, like the National Airline, the main banks, they all have meditation rooms. They teach their staff meditation. The police force, everything. It's very common. It's nothing, something that different, really. Now, they don't really teach them a lifestyle associated with vegetarianism and things like that, but...
Just meditation.
Yeah.
And
but all the attitudinal things that go with meditation, you know, how to respect people and so on.
This desire to help others, to do service, was it like one of the reasons why you chose this life after your education?
I think so, you know, because I think there's like a, like I was saying, an epidemic of depression. And I think people have lost meaning in life, you know. People live their life so superficially, quite frankly, wherever you go in the world. You know, it's a superficial life, just go out, have fun, but people aren't inside, you know. It's no real substance or meaning or purpose to life. People are empty, and the emptier you are, the more you run around, you know. I often feel the way we fill the emptiness these days is busyness. Look how busy people are everywhere. Oh, I'm so busy. Because actually, the more when they stop and think, they're not happy. Right. So just keep busy, hoping that I won't go into those feelings of unhappiness. So people just rush and rush and rush. And people know that, but they don't know how to replace it. And I think when a spiritual life is practiced, because when I started in the 1970s, meditation was very popular outside of India. Because in those days, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, you know, all those musicians, they meditated. So that was popular. In the 1980s, the stress thing began, you know, so much stress. So, and the Time magazine did a story, I think in 1981, where they really began to talk about the effects of stress on health and how it really, so many health issues are based on stress. So people began to meditate more to deal with their stress and anxiety. As a discipline, and but now what I see is that it's more like it works these days as a lifestyle, where you just make a decision in this very fast, very busy, very complicated, complex world to meditate and think in a simple, clear way. You know, even educate myself how to think well in a very challenging world is, and people like that. They like the idea of knowing how to deal with my thoughts and my feelings inside.
So in this episode, we started our journey with Brother Charles, and how we from his experiences, saw how he changed from being almost an atheist to an agnostic person, and now to a person who enjoys his spiritual journey. And we will be talking more with him in the forthcoming episodes to know more about the relationship that he shares with God and more experiences from his spiritual journey. We hope you will join us in the next episode too. And thank you, brother, for joining us in this episode.
Thank you, Saranya. Thank you very much.
Thank you, viewers, for joining us, and have a great time. A big, warm-hearted welcome to all the viewers watching Soul to Soul Talk Show. In the previous episode, we started this journey with Brother Charlie Hogg from Australia, and we will be continuing this journey in this episode too with him. A big welcome to you, brother. Pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
In this episode, we'll see how spirituality can help us in our relationships, and if it can answer the questions to the issues that we face in our relationships. Brother, how do you define a relationship in a spiritual angle, as a spiritual person?
Actually, Sharanya, in my experience, when you talk to people and you ask people what's the most important thing in their life, they will always come back to relationships. And really, virtually 90% of people will say that it's the fabric of a quality life. And I think that we're living in a time now, a culture, where people, I think, because we're a bit disconnected from my true self, we don't receive love from ourselves very much, then we're very dependent on others. So if others are giving it to me, I'm fine, but if they're not, then very quickly people feel very hurt, very resentful, and start the game of blame. And I think it's one of the great things that's helped me on my spiritual journey is to, take full responsibility for how I feel. Because I feel these days the way I define a relationship from a spiritual perspective is that all relationships do is trigger what is already sitting inside of me. When you come in touch with somebody, some pull out your feelings of a lot of love and a lot of warmth and a lot of respect, but others trigger other feelings of a little bit of anger or hurt or whatever. But often when we're not really spiritually aware, we always blame you for the way I feel. But I think someone who has a spiritual fabric in their thinking doesn't blame you, but realizes that you're like an instrument to open up what's already sitting inside of me. And I would say on the spiritual journey that other people help me know who I am. Because every feeling that comes in my mind, if it's a feeling of deep love or deep hurt or a lot of anger, is actually my feeling. And I think a truly spiritual person takes full responsibility for their feelings and doesn't project it onto others.
So if these feelings that are emanating from you because of others, if they are negative, then how do you change them? How do you transform them?
Well, I think that, you know, when I start to realize that they're my feelings, then this is the spiritual journey, really, is to take responsibility for them. And I think, you know, start to work on the quality of my feelings inside, because I read some research once which was saying that whenever you connect with another person, like you and I are doing at the moment, you know, the impact of language, of what you say, is only 10 to 15% of the impact of relationship. 80 to 90% is non-verbal, is the feelings and the expressions. You know, the modern language is body language. And so it's like if you get two messages from me, one is what you feel, but one is what you hear. You know, you hear something, very nice things, but you feel something different. You always trust your feelings. And I suppose for me, where I'm at in my spiritual journey at the moment is I realize that if you change your feelings, you can change the quality of any relationship. I really believe that. Because often we are innocent. We hold critical and negative thoughts about other people, and then we wonder why we don't come close. Because people feel your thoughts. People feel the energy. It's like a subtle barrier between people. And when I realize that if I keep my mind clean, and if I understand how to see good in people, you know, to me the measure of my ego is seeing fault in other people. That's the best measure. And if I'm always critical, that's a measure of how much ego I really have. But if I see virtue, and if I have goodwill and good feelings, the karmic effect of that is people will love you. And, you know, when you have those feelings with most people, 95% of the time, you will win love from the hearts of people. But that's where people are innocent, because they hold these negative feelings, then they don't realize that actually they're contributing to the distance in the heart, you know, the negative relationships.
What are the factors you think can act like a catalyst in helping us, you know, taking the responsibility for our feelings and giving out only pure positive ones in spite of how the other person is behaving with us?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's a decision you make in life. You know, you can focus on all the negative in people, but I think at one point in my life I realized I really consciously made a decision that everyone has strengths and weakness. You can focus on the weakness and they'll probably focus on yours. But if you learn to value people, and I've seen it in the Brahmakumaris, especially amongst a lot of the very experienced yogis, that they love people and they win the love from the hearts of others, and it's a huge power. But I think it comes back to how I see myself, and the first relationship in life is with me. And I often feel that if that relationship is dysfunctional, if the way I treat myself is not healthy, I'm not going to treat you in a very healthy way either, you know. So this first relationship, I often feel that there's three personalities inside of us, all of us. The first I call is the eye of superiority, or the eye of arrogance. It's the facade I present to the world. And this is the eye that thinks I am better, I know more, I am right. And this is the eye that sees fault in other people. This is the eye that always compares yourself with other people. You know, as soon as you meet someone, you compare.
Right.
But when it comes into my feelings, you know, when that eye is ruling, that's when I easily feel insulted, disrespected, not valued, excluded, sensitive. You know, sensitivity is ego. And when that eye is ruling my inner world, then it really has a disastrous effect on my relationships. But that's often a front for the second eye, which I often call the vulnerable eye, which is the eye of inferiority, the ego of inferiority, or the lack of self-respect. And that eye thinks in the opposite way, thinks I'm not good enough, others are better, others know more. And when it comes into my feelings, hopelessness, depression, and this is the eye that when it's ruling in my thinking, someone just says something normal to me, like they say, "Hello, how are you?" Why did you speak to me like that for? You know, if you're feeling low, you interpret everything in the wrong way. And so we fluctuate and we distort my relationships. And that's why the third eye is the eye, the original self, you know, the soul. And I found personally, the more I've practiced to be an eternal soul and to engage with the other as eternal soul, that's the building blocks of really deep, rich, loving and healthy relationships.
So once you've taken this decision to use your third eye, how challenging was it from your personal experience to actually, you know, achieve it, your goal of using your third eye?
Well, you know, it's because the habit is to see through these eyes and see difference and compare, and you know, it takes time. I don't think that anyone pretends that spirituality is a quick fix.
Right.
You know, it takes time and practice. And yet what I've noticed, that when you meet somebody and you actually see them as a soul, and you don't make all the judgments of the usual mind, you know, are they attractive or unattractive, and their background, you know, the mind judges in split second. You actually talk to them, they feel comfortable, they feel respected actually. You know, when you see beyond all the conditions and the judgments of the body, you actually connect with someone as a soul. And I believe that when you really see someone as a soul, it's the vision of equality. Otherwise, when we think I'm a body, we will see with superiority or inferiority, you know. Quite frankly, usually inferiority, you know, and I feel a little bit inferior to the other. That's the normal human psyche. And that's not a healthy foundation for a relationship. And I found when I began to practice meditation that to have the vision of brotherhood is such a beautiful thing, but it's a very deep thing, and it takes, as we were saying, time to practice.
So you had to remind yourself, like every instant, every situation you faced, you had to remind yourself of this truth that you found?
Yeah, I think so, because the addiction, when I forget who I am, is to accept sorrow from others, you know. Sometimes I feel we all have a PhD in accepting sorrow. You know, we're experts. We get hurt so easily, and I think if people are honest, we're too fragile, very fragile inside. And that's just, it's a lack of spirituality, really. And when you start to get strong, you stop this habit of wanting something from other people, and when they don't live up to my expectations, just then taking hurt or disrespect and then blaming them. You know, to me, I often feel if I ever find my mind blaming, I just know I've stepped right out of truth. I'm in the world of falsehood and ignorance, because it's so much self-deception when you're making my life difficult, you're the problem. And that's because spirituality is the opposite. It's taking full responsibility for who I am and how I feel.
Sort of very common scenario we face is meeting people who are very self-centered, very selfish, and they have their goals in mind, and all they care about is that, whether they you know, defame others in achieving them, or whether they cause trouble or hurt to others, they do not care. But still, if I have to take up this spiritual look at him as a spiritual being, and you know, give those same original pure love and respect for him, I still feel it is a challenge. So how do I overcome that?
You know, I feel that when people are very self-centered, which is quite common today, it's because they're empty, you know. There's nothing much inside, and all they're thinking is what I need. I need your love, I need your respect, I need your support. So actually, you can almost feel merciful when you see it through a spiritual lens. If you don't see it through a spiritual lens, you feel a bit frustrated with them. But But you know, sometimes people are so well educated, they seem so important, and yet they're very empty. They're very empty inside. And so I think that when I I realize that I can have more of a merciful feeling to them. And what I've seen everywhere, that if you have a vision of respect, it softens people and people will listen to you. They will respond. To me, I would say the prime thing of a leader today is know how to respect those they're leading. And often they can't do that. You know, a lot of leaders today have Harvard degrees in management and leadership, but they don't know how to get on with people. They have a lot of intellectual ability, but no emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is nothing more than being able to read people. You know how we do. You can read people through their faces. And know how to respond to people, make them feel comfortable, make them feel valued and needed. I saw a survey once in Australia, what do people want most in the workplace? And there it was, more than money, they want to be valued, needed and respected. And to me that's, you know, if we understand that, whether I'm a leader in business or in the family or anywhere, if we value and respect people, and even if they're difficult, how do you change them? Do you change them by correcting them and telling them off? It makes people worse. Because fundamentally, the more ego people have on the surface, it's covering up the lack of self-respect. And so the more you correct them, they feel weaker and they get worse. And I think today, today we just have to really value people. And really a huge example in my life was the head of the Brahmakumaris, Daddy Prakashmani, you know, and I had the fortune of traveling with her in quite a few countries, and I saw she respected everybody. And because of that, you know, she opened people's hearts and people would listen to her. She was such a wise leader. You know, she would listen and respect people, and then when people give her respect, then she can tell them what she needs to tell them. You know, she was brilliant. She was brilliant in understanding how to get on with other people.
And another issue that is commonly faced is expectations. Like people expect a lot from you in a relationship, in your profession. But I personally feel if when someone expects something good from me, my performance worsens. I don't know why that happens. So how do I say, you know, push that aside, push the expectations aside and just focus on my work?
You know, I think the main expectations from ourselves, and you know, I'd say a lot of pressure comes from these internal expectations. I have to be this, I have to be that. And I think so much of today's anxiety and stress comes from the pressure I put on myself, and I would say that's more than others put on me. You know, when I'm in my self-respect, if others have expectations of me, it doesn't really affect me. But when not, I try to live up to expectations. And I've noticed that people who have a lot of expectations are always disappointed. People never live up to their expectations. You know how some people, they're never happy. They're always disappointed in others. And I think what I've learned is acceptance of people today. To be very open, I find today people, if I can say, look very good, but internally aren't very strong. You know, we look good on the surface, but internally there's a lot of things going on. When they feel loved, accepted and valued, it gives them strength to, you know, but when I'm pushing them and things, actually they feel a lot more fragile, and they don't take it in a good way from you. They feel you're pushing a pressure, the pressure of expectations. I mean, I think it's a big thing to take off expectations of myself and accept me as I am is really one of the journeys of spirituality, you know? And that means to be honest with my strengths, but honest with my weaknesses, and accept I'm in a process of change. I make mistakes, I have weaknesses, but to be honest about it with myself, I think is a great thing. And I think, you know, sometimes the pressure we put on ourselves today is so much, and I think, you know, I've read statistics of people in general, but especially young people, there's so much pressure to perform that they can't sleep and all these sorts of things. It's difficult.
And what should be your attitude or your feeling for the person who expects from you? Like, how should you look at him?
As a soul. You know, I think not to take sorrow from it. I don't think there's an excuse. You know, if we live in our self-respect, we don't accept any disrespect or any expectations, anything from anybody in that way. Because when I'm in my self-respect, I know my own value, and whatever people think, whether they're impressed with me or not impressed with me, it doesn't affect how I feel. I can remember when I began my meditation journey, I realized early on that I often saw myself through the eyes of others, you know. And if others are happy with me, I was happy with me. But if they weren't happy with me, I wasn't, you know. That's how we've lost our self-respect, and we always look for approval. If you approve of me. So some people go into the workplace with lack of self-respect, they're always seeking approval. And if they don't get it, they feel devastated. No. Actually, you do much better when you live in self-respect. Only then can you give love to people, can you give respect to people. And the external expression of genuine self-respect is humility. And really, I think it's fair to say I was once visited my dentist in Sydney. And he was talking to me and he was saying, these days, you rarely see a humble person, a really genuinely humble person. But we love humble people. Actually, they win our love, you know. And if you think it's like egoless, like sometimes you meet very old people and little children, you love them because the humility draws our love. But when there's an adult who's, you know, maybe a professional person, but they're still genuinely humble, it's very attractive. It's very, and though sometimes today people read it as weakness. They see, oh, you know, someone's humble, but they're not weak at all. They're actually
very
strong. Yeah.
We also see there is an increase in the scale of suicide cases happening around the world now. So is that the result of expectations from the family, society? Is it because that person is not able to give himself more importance and value his happiness more than the happiness of the others? Is that the reason why there is such a huge change in this statistics?
You know, I think it's a lot to do with the culture of the world today. It's so superficial. Life is so superficial. It's more, what's important is what's on your business card, what position you have, which suburb you live in, what car you drive, how much money you make. It's so superficial, and it's everywhere. It's an omnipresent culture. But inside, on the surface, people are so good, and inside they're just nothing inside, you know. And so therefore, that the sort of the ego is just inflamed, and so little tiny things make them feel so depressed. And there's that epidemic of depression, which is this it's like a complete disconnection from my true self in that way. So when people lose hope in themselves, then they feel a complete failure. And you know, often people who commit suicide are people who have big positions and things like that. It's just a message that, to me, like 1 in 4 people suffers from clinical depression. If you want my opinion, I think it's even a much more of that. And this is in every country in the world. It's the World Health Organization statistics. It's a sign that the way we live today is so disconnected from truth. And that's where I think it's just that if we rebuild a natural spirituality, which is what the Brahmakumaris are teaching people, not to convert them into anything, but just to re-engage with who I am, and a natural spirituality as the foundation, the platform for relationships, for work, for family, for everything. Otherwise, you know, the emptiness, the vacuum inside just increases, and unfortunately leads to what you were just describing.
So in this discussion today with Brother Charlie, he shared with us many jewels of wisdom that he has gained through his spiritual experiences on how to make our relationships healthier, happier, and something that makes us feel good. We will be continuing this journey with Brother Charlie in the forthcoming episodes on more such interesting and fascinating topics. Hopefully you will join us in them too. Thank you, brother, for joining us.
Thank you, Sharanya.
Thank you, viewers, for joining us. Have a great day. Hello and a very big welcome to all the viewers watching Soul to Soul Talk Show. In this episode, we will be continuing our spiritual journey with Brother Charlie Hogg from Australia. A big welcome to you, brother.
Thank you, Sharanya.
So, in the previous episode, he shared a lot of jewels of wisdom with us to make our relationships healthy. And we will be sharing a few more of his wisdom in this episode too, and try to answer the questions that I and you have in our minds. It's a general belief that spirituality is usually taken up by people who are not very competent in their profession, who have a lot of time at hand, and who do not have a clear goal. And people who take up spirituality are, people who just want to while away their time doing something useful. But is that belief right? And why is that people believe spirituality is not for people who are very energetic and who want to strive for something in their life?
It's a very interesting question in a way, isn't it? Because the culture of our world says that the aim in life is to be rich, famous and powerful. And it's very interesting because I've seen studies on people who make their life goal money, power and then fame. They're just not happy people. And it's really interesting because that's the culture, and even to the point that this celebrity culture where people think, oh, the celebrities are living a life of dreams. Once in Australia, I gave a meditation course to an actress who is an internationally acclaimed actress, lovely person. But I can tell you, she was so depressed, she was suicidal. Because she was very honest, it all looks good on the surface, but like everyone else, there's emptiness inside. And it's a shown thing. It's a thing that people who base their life on values, relationships, and spirituality are much more fulfilled people. Now, it's possible to have both. It's possible to be a person who has values and relationship, emphasis, but also, is competent in the world as well. That's really the ideal. But the culture, young people grow up today, and because the media, and the media is only a product of our thinking, there's so much emphasis, you've got to be so beautiful, you've got to be so rich, you've got to be out there. But it's not a recipe for happiness at all. It's an absolute guarantee in that way. So it's yet another myth of our modern world, really. There's so many myths that are misleading.
And now I can call it a myth, that people try to look for spiritual gurus and a spiritual say awakening when they are in depression, when they have a lot of problems to face from which they're not able to get out. But is spirituality applicable even when you're having happy days in your life?
Absolutely. Even I would say for me, I think I wasn't an unhappy person, but I was maybe seeing the culture of the world where it just seemed like all people do is just go to university, run around making money, but for what ultimate goal, really? You build your big house and you have your big car, but what then, really? It seems a very superficial sort of existence, and I think, so many people feel that. And therefore, that they sort of feel that internal depression. They don't feel fulfilled as a person at all. But I think for me that, when I sort of, I suppose, got my spiritual clarity on what I wanted to do, it enabled me to, I think even that's the foundation of doing well, even in the workplace, when you know yourself, and especially I think someone who's self-realized becomes very good with relationships. Quite frankly, most of business and work is relationships. And like I was saying, I think sometimes people have the best qualifications, but they're not good with people, so they don't get anywhere. And I often think, mothers have the best emotional intelligence, and quite frankly, they're the best leaders. It mightn't be recognized out there. People give superficial respect to someone because he's the CEO, but sometimes when someone has love, and then they really love them, they have that admiration, and they'll follow from the heart, not just because, oh, you've got the title of CEO, so I have to show you respect, but it's not from the heart, if you know what I mean.
And do you feel it will improve the quality of work, the profit that the company is having, if they bring in like professionalism and spirituality together? Absolutely.
And honestly, I think the first program I was talking to you, I was saying that in Australia, so many of the big, massive companies have meditation rooms. Now, they're not stupid. Why do they do that? Because they know when their staff are relaxed, calm, peaceful, happy, they're more productive. If people are unhappy, it's shown their immune system goes down and they have a lot of days away from work, or there's a lot of more conflict in the workplace, or their mind is so engaged with their problems that they can't really produce properly. And these days, and I'm sure it's the same in India, but I find all over the world, so much in the workplace, there's seminars around self-awareness and self-value, and give all these sorts of things, because people have the skills base, but they don't really have the spiritual base. You need both. It's not that you should only have the spiritual base. You need both bases to become a successful person. I often feel there's three intelligences we need. We need intellectual ability. That ability gets me a great job, helps me earn money, helps me understand the world. But when I'm stressed and anxious, does it help? Doesn't help. So the first intelligence is, IQ, intellectual ability. The second is emotional intelligence, which is the wisdom to get on with people. And a lot of people have those two forms of wisdom, but the third wisdom is spiritual intelligence. And if emotional intelligence is the wisdom to have loving, rich relationships with others, spiritual intelligence is the wisdom to have a loving, rich relationship with me. Because if that relationship is polluted, it pollutes absolutely everything. And this is what the Brahmakumaris are teaching, is like that first intelligence. We respect that intellectual ability. You need the university degree. You need the emotional intelligence. But if you don't have spiritual intelligence, I find little things disturb you. You have no inner strength to face problems. And what people want today in the workplace is people who are stable, sensible, can work hard, face problems. But if people get emotional, if they're difficult, And if they have a lot of ego, they're sensitive, they misread all the messages, they don't work well. And so investment in my spiritual intelligence, that spiritual awareness, I think is an essential ingredient, and becoming more so for someone in the workplace, someone.
And can your spiritual intelligence increase the other two quotients? I
would say definitely, because the more you know yourself and respect yourself, the more you can respect the other. And I think you get a much bigger perspective on life. You know, we are living in such a sensitive world. You know, when I travel, like I've just been in Scandinavia, I went to all 4 Scandinavian countries, and then I was in the Middle East. It's a very uncertain world everywhere. The future is very uncertain. And I think that you might have all the skills of your education, but if you don't have an ability to deal with change, to be flexible, you know, to know yourself deeply, then really you get thrown. If there's an economic crisis, a political crisis, and any day it can happen anywhere in this world. I think, you know, the leader of the future is the person who is very flexible and is in that state of self-awareness, so that they can adjust to very fast changing circumstances.
Okay, till now we've been discussing about me and the other person, like soul to soul. So where does the Supreme Soul come into this picture? How do you bring in God in your spiritual life?
I think, you know, for me, it's the anchor. You know, because when my mind is connected to my boss, family members, the workplace, the situation, what happens to my mind? You know, one day it's great and the next day, you know, and it's really like that. What I've learned is not just a belief in God. No, I don't think people just want a belief, a devotional belief, but it's like you're connected to a source which is constant, stable, always there, just a thought away, loving, peaceful, pure, benevolent. And it's almost like when you don't know yourself, I'm looking for you to love me and respect me, and you to support me, and you to do this. And when they go up and down, what happens to me? When I look to God as my lover, in a sense, as the soul who's my support, then that's fixed. It's like the intellect is anchored there. And as the world swirls around you with ups and downs, here's and there's, you know, people loving you and then they don't like you, and then you have that sense of inner stability. And to me, it's a very natural relationship. That's what I like. You know, some people, the way I see God as a soul, like myself, but an eternally pure soul, you know. And some people still see it as a concept or a belief. You know, so it's sort of like when they meditate, they're meditating on a belief or a point of philosophy, but actually it's really refinding the lover of the soul, you know, the real companion.
Soulmate.
Yeah, exactly, a soulmate. A real living, pulsating soul. And you know, once I was in Germany, and there was a sister there who's a BK, and she was doing experiments in telepathy with another psychologist in another city. So whenever they thought of each other, they wrote down the time. And they did it over months, and 70% were within seconds, because each time you think of somebody, you know, like you're sitting here even interviewing me, I'm sure a few people have popped into your mind.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, because you get little thought messages, they think of you, and you pick it up, you know, but often we don't consciously think they're thinking of me. So the thoughts have an energy, and it's instant, absolute instant you pick it up. It's the same with God. Actually, I'm connecting in a real sense. And when I connect, I'm picking up the energy of that pure soul. And when that's,
so does he think about us? He keeps thinking about us?
Yeah. And so it's like that's the influence on my mind.
Huh.
You know, it's like a real energy. It's not just believing in some concept. It's a real living relationship. And that's what has become really important for me, to make it very real. Of course, it's a challenge because the way we understand the Supreme Soul doesn't have a physical body. And so to communicate, I have to also go onto the same wavelength. And I often think it's like God's on the FM dial. And when I
need to tune in.
Yeah. When I'm body conscious or I'm not self-aware, I'm on the AM dial. Now, I know the FM dial exists, but I can't tune in. If I go onto the FM dial, in other words, I become soul-aware, I'm tuning in. It's real. It's absolutely real. It's not just sitting there imagining and sitting and believing in a concept. I'm actually connecting with the Supreme Soul. And that's a huge source of internal power. Massive.
So what are the relationships that you have with God, that you experience with God?
Well, I think my personality, you know, I feel the most important thing in life is the exchange of love. So I really feel, you know, God's like my best friend, you know, my lover in that sort of sense, you know, because I find when the soul feels love, real love, I think there's such a sense of that's all you really need, you know, and really the mind cools down. I think when love is there, you can really feel peace. If love isn't there, true love in life, the agitated mind can never rest. You know how some people, the mind's agitated, it's sort of always looking, jumping, searching, it can never just relax. Because I think unless you taste a quality of love, then, I don't know, life, you're restless, you're discontent. And I think that, you know, that's what I found, that when I really feel that genuinely, I feel so easy and self-accepting. And so that's one relationship I think is a really good friend. So in life, as we move about in life, you've got a really good friend, but also a guide in a sense, because there's so much to learn in life, you know. You never stop learning. In fact, I think it increases the learning curve. How to deal with situations, how to deal with people, you know, how not to overreact. And I think when that sort of friendship and guidance is there, it helps in a very real way. It's not that just you sit and pray in the morning and then go and behave differently, but it's like during the day, that relationship is really with me. And I feel when it's close, I've often noticed when I meditate well, if I can say that, I'm different. I'm much more gentle, you know, and soft and understanding of people. You know, I can see there's a tangible change in my behavior. Yeah.
So you experience these relationships when you are meditating?
Yeah. To be very honest, I don't consciously think, oh, I'm now doing this relationship or that relationship. It's just
those feelings.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely. I mean, when you meditate, you do many different things, because I think, you know, sometimes I love to practice aspects of soul consciousness, self-awareness, but I love to really feel connected, feel that love, and sometimes in that state of when you really feel you're in that elevated state, reflect in that state. So if you have something to understand, to reflect on it when you're in that elevated state, because then you see clearly if I need to change something in my own attitude or how to deal with a situation. So I like to
Brother, you said the relationship you enjoy the most with God is that of a friend, and a common saying is, a friend in need is a friend indeed. So how does this friend of yours help you when you're in need?
Very much, you know, because I think that that's what friends are. And, you know, if you look at life, friends are the most enduring relationship of all, in a way. You know,
they last the longest.
They last the longest, and they're usually the most stable. And I think that it's like when you develop this friendship, in a sense, that it's like an awareness as you go about your life. You know, someone to talk to in a way, mentally. And And I feel that when you're in that soul-conscious state, you know you're closer to truth. You know what you need to do. You know, even if a part of you is reacting to a scene, you know, you do feel a little bit frustrated or angry, but still in your mind you know that your behavior should be different, and you can bring it back into that behavior. I mean, everything about the spiritual journey is learning and observing, and you know, and it takes time. You need patience. I remember once when I started in London, Daddy Janki, who is now the head of the Brahmakumaris, she said, you need 3 things in spiritual life. The first is patience. The second is patience.
The third should be patience.
More patience. And it's true with myself, because we want to change immediately. But with those, as we know, those habits, those impressions, those sanskaras, those habitual patterns, they're deep. Some of them are deep. So I find that, you know, some things change easily, some habits, but some soft sanskaras can change, but the hard ones take time. They do take time.
So this deep understanding of yourself as a spiritual being, how has it shaped the purpose of your life now? What is the purpose of your life now?
It's totally shaped it. And I feel, you know, the purpose of life for me is to love God and have a benevolent attitude to everybody, you know, just to feel it's a life to serve. Because, you know, I've had the fortune, I think, to visit something like 80 or 90 countries, which I really love, because each part of the world is so unique. People are so lovely, but people are suffering deeply. No, really. As I said, no matter how good they look on the surface, really inside. And I think that when, you know, you feel that love of God in a true way, you have a lot of merciful feelings. And it's, you know, just to have a life dedicated to serve, not with an arrogance, I'm serving you, but just to make life or the atmosphere better, or offer people. And, you know, to be very open. Some people don't accept some of these ideas, that's fine. But at least you can give love and respect to people. And I've had some amazing experiences all over the world of, you know, meeting all kinds of people from all religious backgrounds and non-religious backgrounds. And I feel that, yeah, people are thirsty for something of truth that's relevant to them.
So if I want to start on this journey, like completely not from a spiritual inclination, or not having any idea of this, but I want to start on this journey, so what do you think I should experiment with first, or what do you think I should open up to first?
Well, I think just have the aim to take responsibility. And you know, I think there's 2 types of people. There's one who, when they get on in life, things happen, they feel very angry, very resentful and frustrated, and blame a lot, and feel that life's dealt me a bad card. And then there's people who sometimes go through that and realize that actually, you know, it's a learning, and I've got to take responsibility, I have to change myself. And I think that at least when people come to that point, they're open to spirituality. I mean, at first, really, you need to do a course, and all our centers, all the Brahmakumaris offer a very simple, universal course on the underpinning knowledge of how to meditate. But then you need to practice for some months. Like in Australia, we have 3 beautiful live-in retreat centers. They're very beautiful places, and every weekend we're full. And I always say to people when I'm there that you've got to do it for at least 3 months, because, you know, when you wake up every morning and you meditate, and then you step into the day practicing attitudes, you start to see the benefit of it, and then you're motivated to continue. But people want an instant fix these days, you know. Just like if you've got a headache, you take a drug. They want it. But this is where the patience is required.
The 3 patience.
Yeah, you need patience, but it's the best investment in a good life. You know, to look after your own. No one else is going to look after your inner world. You know, your mind, your heart, your feelings. It's essential today. I'd say it's essential.
I had a wonderful time, brother, taking this journey with you. And I'm sure our viewers too enjoyed these 3 episodes that we had with you.
Thank you, Sharon. It's been lovely to meet you too, and thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure meeting you, brother.
Thank you.
So, as we found that just to start this journey, we just need to open up to new ideas and practice them and have patience till it shows its magic in our life. And we hope these experiences that Brother Charlie has shared with us has inspired you to take that first step. We will be meeting you with more eminent personalities from different countries and different professions in the forthcoming episodes. Do join us in them too. And keep watching Soul to Soul Talk Show. Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thank you, viewers, for joining us, and have a great life.